Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hey friends, welcome into the podcast. This is episode 110, and I'd like to pose a scenario for you to see if this sounds familiar. Let's say you start designing websites and you really enjoy it. You get good at design and you get to know your tools. And before you know it, you end up designing sites for family and friends. And then you start getting some paying clients and then more and more web design clients. And then you realize that you have, holy crap, a legitimate business on your hand. And generally at the start, it's really exciting and it goes well. And then all of a sudden, you'll likely get to a point where you realize things are getting out of control. You had no game plan for this. Your systems and your processes are a mess, and you've essentially created what I like to call a Frankenstein business that's running you, not the other way around. If that sounds familiar and that is you, it's okay. You are not alone. This is the exact same thing that I went through because when I became a professional web designer and a business owner, I didn't plan for it, as many of you know. I did not prepare for it. I didn't set out and say, I'm going to create a business plan and start a business. It just kind of happened. I just started doing it on the side. I had full intentions of being a web designer for an agency, and then I just ended up making enough doing freelance to take it full time. So if that's you, I do have good news for you because you can do two things depending on where you are in your journey. If you are early on, you can avoid all this and you can create a great plan to follow and a proven path to follow. But if you're already a little further along in your journey and things are spiraling out of control, you can always stop. You can pivot and you can make the necessary adjustments you need to your business to have a successful plan moving forward. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this episode. In this one, I'm bringing in Kelly Diekmann, who is a web design and marketing agency owner. She's a business coach, and she's also a partner in a online course creation business called BreakIntoWeb with my good buddy John Wooten. And she, in this episode, shares her proven path for mapping out a successful business plan. And she has a lot of experience in this, being a coach and working with web designers all over the world who are serious about taking their freelance web design business to something serious. And I'm really excited to share this episode with you because I completely back up everything she talks about when it comes to having vision, mapping out your plan, really working on your systems and your processes and all of the business aspects that are going to keep your business profitable and sustainable. So I can't wait for you to hear this. And it is interesting because Kelly is a direct competitor to me with BreakIntoWeb and John. They essentially have a course that, echoes and mirrors a lot of what I teach, but I think it's great to promote other folks who are doing what I'm doing. As you know, I'm all about competition or co-opetition. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. There's so much value in learning from what I've learned in this example with my business, but then also learning from somebody else with what they've learned in their business with web design, because the way I do proposals and contracts is different than the way Kelly and John do with BreakIntoWeb. So I say all that to say I do encourage you to check out BreakIntoWeb after this and to see if it's a good fit for you as well if you're ready to level up your web design journey. So I'm really excited for you. Again, even if you're further along in your journey, it's not too late. You can always map out your business moving forward. And I do want to say before we dive in, one of the key pieces to having a successful web design business that we talk about in this episode is your processes and your systems. And web design in particular, if you feel like all of your website builds are just a complete mess, I want to help you with that. I have my web design process course that's open right now that you can join. It's my 5-phase, 50-step checklist process from planning, building, and launching a website successfully. So that would be a great resource that you could follow up with after this episode if you like it. So without further ado, here's Kelly. We're going to talk about mapping out a successful web design business plan. And again, whether you're just starting out, thank goodness you hear this before you get too far along. And if you are farther along, it's not too late. You can always implement this stuff. Let's dive in. Kelly, welcome on to the podcast. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Josh. It's exciting.
I feel like it's been a long time coming because one of your business partners, my good buddy, my brother from another mother, John Wooten, you and him have a course together. Well, it's almost like a little mini university with BreakIntoWeb. It's funny because you guys are direct competition with me, but I am a big proponent of this lovely word called co-opetition. And just like the web design community, as you've experienced, we're a direct competition with each other, but we love helping each other out. And that's so valuable because there's such a need for web designers. And one thing that I love with fellow course creators is there's always a different style for everybody. So you can just go with the instructors who you resonate with. So I know you guys have been up to some really cool stuff with BreakIntoWeb. Do you mind letting my audience know, first of all, where you're based out of, Kelly, and then what you do with BreakIntoWeb and with your own business?
Yeah. And I totally agree with you on I haven't heard that word before, but I like that. Say it again.
Coopetition.
Coopetition.
Yeah.
And I love that. And we kind of teach that in the course too, because so many people are like, oh, there's already so many web designers. It's like, it doesn't matter. We can all work together, and everyone has different audiences and whatever. So, and like you said, there's a good match for anyone. Okay. I am in Colorado, by way of Nebraska. I've been out here for 5 years, and let's see. Yeah, John and I have the course, BreakIntoWeb. John Wooten is an amazingly talented web designer, way better than me. And he handles like the technical side of the course. And then my piece is more of the business side and business planning and processes and project management, that kind of thing. And yeah, it's very specifically for aspiring freelancers who are looking to get into web design, like beginning stages. So we have kind of a specific target. And most people who find us end up going down like this giant rabbit hole of web design overwhelm, and then they land on us. And yeah, I thought I should probably get that domain, webdesignrabbithole.com, because it seems like everyone goes down that path before they find a mentor that they
That's
trust.
true.
I'm sure
I've seen that. I've seen that over and over again. They're like, I just want somebody who makes it feel less daunting is what they're looking for.
Yes. Because there's 1,001 ways to do every piece of it.
Yeah.
And then I've had a freelance web design gig for almost 20 years that I've done out of my house while raising 3 daughters and 2 dogs who are snoring in this room with me right now. And then I also have a business with my husband because, that entrepreneur gig, the entrepreneur bug bites hard. And so we have a real estate business as well. So it's a whole new, fun, interesting opportunity there.
Well, anyone who has multiple businesses is generally pretty business savvy and is entrepreneurial. And I love that. And that's what we're going to talk about in this one. I figured, like you mentioned, John is the expert designer, the trendy dude. Like he's the design technical guru, but you have a lot of strength in this area with finances and business planning and strategies. And I think that's so worthwhile diving into. We really haven't done too much of that on the podcast so far as like planning and strategy. And that's one reason I wanted to have you on, was to focus on that and to see what's worked for you. Because just like we talked about, there's numerous ways to do something. So there's no right or wrong way to write up a web design business plan and set your strategy. So I figured what we'll do is you laid out some great talking points for us that I figured we could go into, and we can help everybody see what works for them with where they are in their business, even if they've already got it started. Because here's the best news. Like in an ideal world, you would plan out your business before you get started. But I have found it's more important just to do it. And then you can always plan and pivot and strategize once you get things going. Because there are people, and this is the first question for you, Kelly. Have you seen people be paralyzed in the planning stage when they're just like, they're planning too much and they don't act?
Oh, absolutely. And I think I've been there too. I think it's part of the process, right? But yeah, there's this concept of progress over perfection. And yeah, I mean, it's like having, being a web designer and having a website. Like I'm always disappointed with my own website. It's something that's just never done. You're always working on it. And a business plan should honestly be the same way, especially for, freelancers where the business is essentially you. Yeah. Your business plan shouldn't look like anyone else's. The agency types, there might be more of a kind of a template or a guide for a business plan for that kind of business. But for freelancers, it's truly like, they're all completely custom to your situation, to your target, to the industry. And there's so many pieces and moving parts, and it'll never be done. It will always evolve.
Even
totally.
Lifestyle, right? Like, do you want to take on certain things or do you not? Like, that's one reason I love the freelance realm of web design, because you can really do whatever the heck you want. Like if you want to do SEO, awesome. If you don't want to touch SEO, there's plenty of people you can partner with. And there's all these different areas of web design where you can hone in on your zone of genius and what you're really good at. That's what I like that what you've done with John is like John has his areas. I mean, he can, he's obviously super savvy with business and stuff too, but that's like your thing and that's his thing. So it's really, really cool. And it's interesting. I didn't realize you had your business for that long. When you started, just out of curiosity, when you started 20 years ago or so, did you have a business plan or did you fumble your way into it? Okay. Yeah. I wanted to know how organized you were just to make us feel better.
P.S. I've done everything wrong, which is what kind of initiated the course. And there's been a few like major events in my life that have kind of, that have made me forced me to figure out the business side, which is why I kind of took that on as my area of expertise. But yeah, one thing was again, doing a business with kids from home, which is, I mean, it sounds easy. It's really hard. And,
super hard,
but I got to a point where I was, just drowning in work and drowning in babies. And, I call it my hobby gone out of control. I never, you ask if I ever had a business. No, no, I never planned on doing this, as a career. I thought I'd be some like fancy exec somewhere wearing a power suit, which is just like my worst nightmare now. But, that was kind of what I had in mind when I was like in college and stuff. And then it was just, it started as this like, it wasn't even, I did one project in a CS 101 class that was creating a website.
Was that like Dreamweaver or something?
Oh God, not even. No, it was hard coded from scratch in tables. I'm a web designosaur is what I like to say. Cause I've been through all of it. Nice. It's a pretty young industry in the grand scheme of things, but yeah, that's how I got started. And it was just kind of this hobby. It reminded me of scrapbooking. I used to like make like physical scrapbooks, before social media, we like printed them out and put them on paper. But anyway, I just kind of latched onto this creative aspect of it and thought it was fun. Just became this hobby. People just hear, oh, you do that? Oh, well, here, do this. And then it just very, very, very slow snowball effect of, just word of mouth referrals. Never took it seriously, honestly, until my husband and I decided to start a family, and kind of this light bulb went off like, oh, I should, I could do this web design thing while raising kids, and that'll just be so easy and simple, and it's not. But yeah, there were a few points where I was drowning in work and drowning in babies. And I was like, I had to finally take that step back and be like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I got to make some significant changes, and stop winging everything. To actually, make this a business that I can sustain. And so that was a significant moment. And then we moved out to Colorado 5 years ago. And my business had grown on word of mouth alone, which was great. And I didn't lose any of my Nebraska clients, but the referrals kind of slowed down a lot because the new, referrals wanted to work with someone local, which is understandable. Yeah. And so that really slowed down. And for the first time I had to like try to get business, which I had never had to do before. And so those two pieces, those two events, really led me down, figuring out the business side. And again, I did all of it wrong. And no, I never had a business plan until like 5 years ago.
Well, that's what's so great is it's never too late. It's never too late to plan things out to tweak, revamp, and pivot your business. One of the points you have coming up is going to be about outreach, which I'm really excited to dive into, particularly since you did change your state. Yeah. That's very intimidating. I have some students right now who are just moved and they're like in a different location. They're like, wow, it's a whole different ballgame now. So that's all great. I think what you're hitting on is kind of the first point, which you had for us, which is having a business plan. And you do get to a point at some point where you've got to plan something. You have to at least have a vision and something to shape your business around. Otherwise, it does just become this Frankenstein of a business that just runs you. And that is not uncommon. If it makes you feel any better, I'm sure you've seen this. Like,
no, absolutely.
We all do this. Like, I don't know any successful web designer who went through a typical college type of path. It's all just fumbling into it. So what is, So you kind of had this similar to me. It was just kind of on the side. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. And I didn't come up with a business plan as much. I did a little bit. I envisioned kind of what I wanted to do and where my price points were. But there was a big mental shift with having something that was almost like side hustle to making it full-time and serious. What are your thoughts on that? Like what's some of your advice for somebody who is doing it part-time or side hustle, but wants to take it serious and wants to, make a plan to do it?
Right. Well, I mean, BreakIntoWeb is a great option for you, but to just, again, making that mental shift and just being aware of, hey, this is a business, treat it like a business. A lot of times with freelance web design, especially the freelance chunk, starts out as a side gig and it's just this, you don't really treat it like a business when it's this side hustle because you got a billion other things going on. So if you want to switch into that focus, just sitting down literally and figuring out that, call it a business plan, but I mean, it can mean anything. Just putting down some like simple goals, or even your big ass goal, whatever the thing is that you want. So say it's going full-time freelance, great. But that's not something that you can, put on your planner for tomorrow. Go full-time freelance. So, right. So from there, you have to kind of break it down into smaller goals and keep doing that kind of reverse engineer style until you have like action steps. I mean, that's how I approach goal setting. I mean, I was an athlete all growing up and it was the same way with that. It's like, I want to be a national champion. Can't do that tomorrow. It's just like, what are the steps we got to do to
That's
get
a
there?
good point. Yeah. In 2012, I ran a half marathon, which is the most running that I'll be doing. And I remember it was the same thing. It wasn't like, all right, I'm going to go run 13 miles tomorrow.
Right.
It's like, okay,
you gotta take
I can do
steps.
2 and I'm about to die. So I should probably create, get the plan in action and if we get to follow through. That's the big thing as well. But
yes,
it
that's
is,
the hard part.
follow through. But it's a very valuable point, being that you do have to actually sit down and you don't have to create like this advanced spreadsheet. Correct. I just told you before we went live, one of my web design members, she showed the whole group in my web design club, the spreadsheet that she listed out, which was very detailed and awesome. The beauty about that is that if you know your services and you can calculate how much it's going to be and all that, that is the actual tactile thing that is going to help you know what to charge. Because that's the big thing. Like if you want to, so if somebody, like you just said, wants to go full-time freelance, well,
right. What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. What does that mean? Like, is that $50,000 a year? Right. Or is that $100,000 a year? What do you advise with that? I mean, I know there's a ton of different ways this conversation could go, but do you find like a spreadsheet or just listing out, what your average project would be, and then how many of those you would need to get to your goal?
Right.
How do you go about that?
I mean, a spreadsheet isn't necessary. I mean, I love a spreadsheet as much as the next guy, but that's not even necessary. It's just kind of deconstructing it to something like doable, because let's say the example is I want to be $100,000 web designer a year. Great. And that might sound crazy. So it's like, how do we break that up? So that would be like what, $8,500 a month. Okay. That might still sound crazy. So how do we break that up? What's a professional website starting price, especially, like our students are just starting out. We say $2,500 minimum for a professional website, so if you're in that $2,500 to $3,000 range and you're trying to get $8,500 a month, that turns into 3 websites a month. It suddenly becomes more doable. And then that's only including, just new projects. And then, of course, there's the recurring revenue, there's multiple revenue streams and partnerships. And there's so many other ways to get there. But yeah, it's breaking it down into a digestible chunk. That's a doable goal. So then the goal becomes, okay, I want to get to 3 websites a month. Let's start with 1. Let's start with getting 1 website a month done, and then work up to 2, and then work up to 3. And, it's just those bite-sized action steps. And instead of looking at this big intimidating goal, it's like, just find the first nugget that you can do today.
That's good. And for a plan, do you plan out annually and then break off those different chunks? Because I've seen so many different versions of a quote unquote business plan.
Right.
I remember I had a friend years ago who was just a corporate dude, and he was like, so do you have your 5-year plan set out? And it took me off guard because I realized somebody in the academic corporate world has no idea how particularly the web design freelance world works. There is no sense in writing out a 5-year plan in web design because we don't even know what things are going to look like in 5 years. So yeah, what are some of the best tactics that you've seen work when it comes to planning? Because I'm sure there's a point where you can plan too far, but then also you don't want to be short-sighted, right?
Right. No, totally. For planning, a lot of, goal setting out there, like talks about like a 10-year plan, which I think is insane. I do like the 5-year plan a little bit better, but again, it's not like specifics as far as, web design industry specific. It's just like, where do you want to be in 5 years? Because it's not necessarily, you're not going to be at the same level and doing the exact same things you're doing now in 5 years, but it's right. Where do you want to be? Typically it's something around, family or someone you love, or like something like it's that why is what I'm getting at, is you got to have that purpose. And so that kind of becomes the 10-year goal. It's not necessarily web design related, but it's purpose driven, and it's what pushes you forward when, things fall apart, because they will. But then as far as, I like quarterly to adjust goals, again, broken to, so you take that big one and then you break it apart into like annual, and then you break those apart. And it always evolves. Like, I don't know if I've ever had like a year-long goal that hasn't evolved in some way. You know what I mean? So it's good to take a look, either monthly or at least quarterly, at what your current, short and long-term goals are, and just adjust, because it's going to evolve. Like you said, web design is going to look totally different in 5 years. So it's this ever evolving industry. And again, with the business plans, especially in freelance, it's just, you have to accept and roll with the evolution and the change, because it's inevitable.
Yeah. And what's interesting, my wife and I were just talking about this the other day. 5 years ago, I did not start this personal brand. I had no interest, or I guess I had a desire, but I didn't even think that I would be teaching in any sort of way. So 5 years ago, I was strictly a web designer who was about to start scaling a business. And that's how quick things can turn. Like last year, I sold my web design agency, and now I'm a full-time course creator and community builder. Like, I am in a completely different place than I was 5 years ago. Had I set out a 5-year plan, not that I wouldn't be doing this, but it may have felt like I turned on myself, or maybe I had all these grandiose plans that maybe would have taken me, like maybe I wouldn't have started doing the tutorials and podcasts and stuff that I do had I had this set out plan. So yeah, I think there's definitely, I think it was a wise point that you said, to have maybe the lifestyle type of goal. Like, what do I want my days to look like, our family, versus, here's exactly what I want to do or how much I want to make, because that can change.
What I like to say is, to focus on the why and not the how, because, and I know it's so hard because people want to, how do you do this? How do you get clients? How do you price? And it's, that stuff will all fill in once you have that really strong why, and that, what you're driving toward. And obviously you need to know your who you're serving, what you're offering. I think for freelancers, the when and the where is really important to address in a business plan as well, because it's kind of a double-edged sword. I can work whenever and wherever I want.
Oh, gotcha.
But you need structure.
Yes.
But focusing on that why, and the business plan is honestly the most important piece. And that's usually, like I said, that 5-10-year goal, whatever. I mean, you don't have to call it a business goal necessarily, but yes, that lifestyle, that where you see or not where you see yourself even, but where you want to see yourself, what you're striving for, have that. And then the how kind of is filled in along the way.
That kind of sparks a question that I had for you, because you just said it. There's where like you think you'll be and where you want to be, which are very different things. Yes. Do you find that people limit themselves when planning?
Oh my gosh, yes, all the time. Especially, working with students just starting out. And yeah, they're obviously a lot younger than me. They're me 15, 20 years ago. Oh, 15, yeah, I don't know. But anyway, it's yes, that there is kind of I don't know. I guess web design is just, it's hard to start into because of all of the unknowns. And a lot of these people are coming from full-time jobs and safe situations. I grew up in a house of entrepreneurs. And so I don't think that way. I've never thought, oh, this isn't a safe decision. I just kind of go for it and like, oh, I'll figure it out later. And I realize, especially after starting this course, I realized how opposite my mindset is from students. And so yes,
that's very rare to have an entrepreneur. Like I had nobody in my family. Still, they have no idea what I do. It's crazy. So confusing. Yeah, no. Like I have had people say that's risky or that's crazy. I just I've kind of, at this point in my career, it's kind of wild because now people are like, oh my gosh, what do you do? How do you do that? But it was just 5 or 6 years ago where people were like, are you sure you don't want to go to college and get a full-time job? Like you're about to get married. Are you sure? Like it was a very different mindset shift.
Yeah.
For a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's, but yeah, I see that a lot. People, that have something in their mind of where they think they'll end up. But it's like, but what do you want? And it's just kind of peeling away layers of figuring out, because it's more, it's more than just web design. I mean, John and I are in the business of changing lives. We're not trying to just help you build a little business. We're trying to help you get the lifestyle that you're dreaming about, that you didn't think that you had, or that you had a chance of getting, or that you even deserve. There's a lot of mindset struggles out there, and yeah, it's hard to, that's hard to crack.
Well, but the good thing is having having a plan is the first step, because you can have all these grandiose dreams and the mindset shifts, but if you don't actually write it out and have a good idea of what you're going to do to get to that's the key. And I struggled with that for years. I went way too many years just kind of doing stuff and then thinking like, why aren't I getting ahead? Why aren't I making more? Well, I wasn't charging enough. I didn't there was no way I could make what I wanted to make charging what I was. So that's definitely the first step. And yeah, you get to that point where, like, you guys are a perfect example. You're a mom, you're a mompreneur, and I'm a dadpreneur. And John just texted me because we have a call coming up here pretty soon. He just let me know that he's touring for 2 weeks and he couldn't do our original call. So you absolutely can build the lifestyle you want in and around web design, but it does start with a plan. So that's great. There's some great stuff in there with mentally, just having that mindset shift. What do you want? Not necessarily where do you think you'll be. We talked about the length of planning and how to plan maybe annually versus quarterly, more of a lifestyle approach. Let's talk about the business itself, because this is the other really important thing that I had a lot of struggles with and a lot of other web designers struggle with. And that is they're constantly working in the business, like doing the projects, and they're leaving their own business on the table. It's easier said than done, particularly in the early days, because you're getting clients, you're doing the work. And I think that's fine. I think it's fine to work much less on your business in the early days, just to build clients and to get more confident with your work and your pricing. But you do have to be intentional about this. What's some of your advice for working on the business versus just in the business?
Yeah. Like I talked about, drowning in work at one point, and the last thing you want to do when you're, overworked is, I'm going to spend today working on, my website portfolio. It's just, it's hard, especially once that work starts coming in. But yeah, what I like to suggest and what I like to do is setting aside, one day a week. Sorry, I'm just getting used to these things.
Oh, you're fine. Mine come out too.
Touching them.
I know. I always end up adjusting them as well.
I like to set aside one day a week that's for your own business. So instead of, answering client emails or working on client projects, that one day, usually Fridays for me, and it's usually half a day, I work on my own business, whatever that may mean. It doesn't have to mean just updating my own portfolio. Obviously, I don't do that. I suck at social. I don't even try to do that. Everyone's different, guys. If you are awesome at social, keep it up. But yeah, that can even mean taking a look at that business plan again and resetting the goals. It can mean, working on ways. One of my favorite things to do, well, I'll get to that in a sec, but working on ways to differentiate yourself. There are so many crappy web designers out there that standing apart is just a little bit of effort is going to go a really long way. One of my big secrets to success of a 20-year freelance career is customer service. And I'm not even talking about like over the top customer service. I'm talking about calling people back,
Yeah. Or updating
yes, I mean,
where projects are.
It's crazy. Like I can't tell you how many times that I've called someone back, a prospect, and they're like, "You are the only one who called me back." So just simple things like getting back to people in a timely manner, being polite, writing a thank you note goes 100 miles. It's crazy. Or one year for my vendors, I sent out like just custom like gift baskets for like Christmas, and one of them reached out to me. He's like, "This is the greatest Christmas gift we've ever got." And he's like, "No, wait, this is the only Christmas gift we ever got." And I spent like $40 on like a bucket of beer or something. Like it was no big deal. And it sent him over the moon. So just like little things. So, how can you make yourself stand out? How can you treat your favorite customers? Like, how can you give them that extra special touch? Because ultimately the goal is cloning those awesome clients. And so how can you, just stay engaged with them and take that one step further? Another thing I do when I'm working on my own business is I like to give back. To me, that's what it's all about. Like the whole point of all of this is, how can we help other people? And so I have a program on my site that's Websites for a Good Cause, where nonprofits, or I don't even care if it's nonprofit or not, but just a struggling organization that can, that doesn't have funds for a website, they can apply. And I've made my favorite projects to work on are those. And so I do spend some time working on those kinds of projects on my Fridays because that's what I want to do.
Day. Yeah. Well, some valuable points in that. I think one of the words that is sticking out to me so far is intentional. You have to be intentional about planning your business in the early days, and you have to be intentional about working on your business, because you can get to the point where if you don't set some constraints and some boundaries, you will literally just do project work all day. And what you just said about customer service and customer care, it's interesting. A lot of web designers I've talked to who have been doing this for years emphasize that. Yeah. And what's really interesting is a lot of professional and seasoned entrepreneurs and business owners emphasize customer care more than they do getting clients. And it's funny how the narrative changes. The narrative in the beginning is, how do I get clients? How do I get clients? How do I get clients? And look, I could do a podcast episode on how to get clients, and I have, and those are my top ranking, like most listened to episodes. Yeah. If I do an episode on customer care, it'll get half the listens or maybe a third of the listens. But that's more important. Like it is it's so much more important to do really good customer service. And like you said, get back to a lead or send them a quick video or do something that differentiates you. So the simple stuff, that goes such a long way, and it is being intentional to work on the business. I think that's a great kind of plan to work towards the full day, on the business day. I think it's probably hard for a lot of folks just starting out. So I would even say, even if it's just a few hours or maybe just 2 hours a week, like it's amazing what you can do if you just turn your email off.
Set something aside. Yeah.
Yeah. And just think about, because what you just said with sending your clients cards or a gift or doing something special, you're never going to think of those ideas if you're just go, keeping up with projects. So it is so important to do this. I love that. And then on the other token, you can work on your business in these segments too. I know for a long time, I spent way too long on my proposals, and I did them all manually. I sent the contract separately. I sent the proposal. I sent the email. So everything was separate. It was taking way too long. When I finally nailed down my process and I used 17 hats and I created this workflow where I set up the email templates, I would always customize certain aspects of it. But then suddenly I would send off the proposal, they would accept it, they could sign the contract, and then they could pay, and it was an automated system. My life changed overnight. I was like, that 6 hours of setting all that up has just saved me hours a week, every
Absolutely.
week for the rest of my life. Like
Absolutely.
it is so worth it to do those things.
Yeah. Yep. Like you said, that's a great thing to work on, your own business time is setting up those processes and just finding what can I automate? What can I make more efficient? I have these little email templates that I set up in Gmail. It's just like the littlest things, like you said, can just save you hours in the long run. And it's just, it's so worth it. And you like keep putting it off. And once you finally do it, it's like, oh my God, that only took an hour and my life is so much easier.
Yes, I was just going to say, that's exactly what I did. I literally put that off for months. I was like, I know I need to do this, but it's going to take a lot of time. I'll get to it eventually. I'm just comfortable with how I'm doing it. And comfort is an enemy in freelance because if you're comfortable doing something, it's likely that it's not optimized. It's likely that you're taking way too long doing something. It was just like any little task that builds up over time. It wasn't near as complicated as I thought it was going to be. And again, in about 6 hours, I think it was, overnight. So that is really important. I love that. I want to transition to another topic that's maybe like a 2.0 or maybe a different phase of the business plan, which is financial strategy, which sounds like a scary corporate term, but it is really, really important that we think, look, to be honest, if I could break this idea down from what I've experienced, it's what services am I offering and how do people pay me? It's as simple as that. Like, how am I actually getting paid? Because sometimes we make it really difficult for clients to pay us, and depending on what services we have in place, sometimes they don't even know that we offer services. So, financial strategy. What does that look like in the world of a freelancer?
Yeah. Again, it's just one of those things. Like, just have one. Just write it down, like, not only what your financial goals are, but kind of figuring out, this would be a good spreadsheet thing, figuring out, what kind of services you offer, and how much, I do this every year, and how much each one of those is making. And is there one that's like a time suck that isn't making much money at all, and, boot that, and then focus more energy and resources into the one that is making the most and is the most efficient. Just having a financial, strategy and just paying attention to those kinds of things. It's so easy. Like, I remember having the 6-figure goal for myself, which I think I finally hit in 2011 or whatever. But I didn't even realize I hit it because I wasn't paying attention to my financials. And so it wasn't until it was like tax time and I'm looking at my reports, I'm like, oh my God, I did it.
You did it.
So yeah, just being aware of your finances and where your money's coming from, and being able to forecast, like, am I going to be able to hit, this financial goal that I have? And can I bump up my recurring revenue to this amount so that I can hit this goal? Just being aware and having it written down and tracking. Reports are your best friend. But yeah, I just mentioned recurring revenue. If that's something that anyone listening isn't doing, then hurry up and get on that.
Most everybody is. I have pretty much every other episode we're talking about a maintenance plan or hosting at some point.
I was binging Josh Hall podcast this week, and yes, I've definitely heard it.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, it's and there's so many ways to set it up, and to, we could have a whole episode on just pricing strategies, but
sure. I think one really valuable thing you said there was, again, going back to intentional, looking at your numbers. What is the top selling product? Focus on that. I just did this recently with my stuff. I never really did that before, I'll be honest. Well, I take that back. I did it in my web design business because I realized I was making way more money with my websites and I was still doing print work in graphic design and branding. And while those opened a lot of doors for me in the early days, I got to a point where they just were not worth it. I was, spending hours on a business card while I had $1,000 websites or thousands of dollars sitting there. Just no one was working on it. So I realized very quickly then, okay, I've got to cut this loose. It's been great. Yep. Thanks for getting me here, but what got me here is not going to get me there. So I realized I had to nix that. And that's when my numbers really changed. And then same thing for my business now. I just looked at this recently and I was like, okay, I know some of the things I'm doing just are not worth my time. For me, it was web design layouts and Divi layouts, which somebody like John is really familiar with, doing child themes. For me, I never did that much of it. I didn't really market it. It just wasn't worth the minor support that I was doing for it. So I basically kind of hid those on my site, and my focus is on my courses. And in fact, what's really interesting, I did not know this until I looked at the numbers, like you just said. I have a bundle, which is all my courses combined, probably basically what you guys have with BreakIntoWeb, which is like all of it. That is by far like over 50% of my income comes from that.
So cool.
Either people going for that directly or they upgrade to that. So it dawned on me, that's what I need to start promoting. I really need to get that out there and make sure it's known. So again, just goes back to the financial strategy. This can be applied to anyone's business. So just look at what is coming in and make sure you offer it too. I'm astounded, and maybe this could segue us to how we promote ourselves and outreach. There, you've got to put it out there. And actually, maybe before we do that, I would love to hear your thoughts on upsells and downsells, because this is really, really important for web design.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, especially when web designers are just starting out, they're like, here's a website for $2,500. And people are like, oh, that's more than I want to spend. It's like, oh, okay, bye. No, there are, have something in your back pocket ready to go. And don't ever sell yourself short. There's like a fine line between discounting until you're dead or to just have that downsell.
Well
said. Like in my case, my downsell is like a one-page website. And so if someone's like, oh, and I love one-page websites. They're like my favorite. They're super fun. I can get them done in a day. I like those. And so, when someone doesn't have a budget for, a custom 10-page site, I pull out the one-page site, and it's like, hey, this is great because it's cheaper, and hey, we can add on to it whenever you're ready to hit that higher price point. And a lot of people go for it. What I'm not doing is like, oh, okay, you can't spend $4,000. How about $3,000? Don't discount yourself short.
That's such a great point.
Yeah. And a lot of people will do, don't get desperate.
Yeah.
You're not doing anyone favors there.
It's so interesting because one of the most common conversations I'm having more and more right now is the idea of like template-based sites. And that was one thing I just had an episode more recently about episode 103, talking about, should that be something you offer? My biggest push on that would be to have that as a downsell, to where if somebody wants to really work with you, but they just don't have that $4 or $5 grand, you don't have to reduce your cost, but you could say, we do have this other option.
Right.
We don't promote it, but I really want to work with you. At least we could do your hosting and recurring stuff. And then once you get to a point where you can invest in the custom route, we could do that. And that's where having a template style solution is huge. I love that idea. What about upsells though? What about for those people who maybe you don't want to tell them about a $3,000 option when they have a really healthy budget, they're a legit company. Because that's what I experienced. When I went into a company locally when at the time, I think the most I'd ever charged was like $3,500. Mm-hmm. And this company I knew was legit. So, and it was a complicated website. I went for it. I did $7,500. I thought, it made me nervous, which is good. I learned if you send something that makes you nervous, that's actually a really good thing. And I remember sending it thinking they're going to be like, no way. And right away they were like, oh yeah, sounds good. Let's go for it. I was like, what? So what about that? But that's tricky because a lot of people are going to be afraid to go for the shoot for the stars kind of thing. Do you have any ideas on, those projects that actually could be 2, 3, 4 times more than you normally would charge?
Right. And typically you'll have a pretty good idea if you're dealing with a client who does have a healthy budget. And I will say, sometimes it's hard to justify, well, why should I charge them more when I'm providing the same thing? Lots of reasons. There's something called value-based pricing that's a whole nother ball game. But when you're dealing with a company that does have a good budget, they're selling stuff for a lot more, and they have a lot more income, and so it's worth more to them. Again, we could totally go into that. But anyway, if the budget is available, and a lot of times those clients are, they'll have like a bigger team or something, or it just takes longer when there's more people involved. But it's funny. I have a similar story to what you were just saying. We had a student who we told her, you gotta double your prices. You just got to. And so she said that her finger hovered over the send button for like 5 minutes when she was reaching out to an existing client with what they wanted a redesign. And she was basically saying, okay, it's going to be twice as much. And she finally signed it, and it was the same thing. It was okay, cool. When can you start? And so it's
amazing that we're our own worst enemies. We're our own worst enemies in so many areas of business.
It's so true. And there was a time, and John and I have had this discussion where like we got so busy that we like legit doubled our prices overnight, and people still went for it. And it's like, what are we doing? What planet is this?
Well, and then it hits you, because I know for me, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's awesome. But then I was like, I could have made
I know
double the amount that I have the past few years had I just done this, had I just listened to this podcast episode 2 years ago. So we're doing everyone a favor, hopefully. Yeah.
It's so true. I mean, there's kind of a balance there between your comfort level, your skill set, and, the types of clients you're taking on. And you have to be mindful of all of that. But yeah, I have no problem charging a bunch. And if you do send that, if you do have that fear factor of, oh man, they're never going to go for this, try it anyway. And then have that downsell in your back pocket ready to go. Okay, well, let's do a 5-page site for this amount. Or another downsell I like is like a payment plan. Okay, you can't pay $3,500 today. How about $500 over the next 5 months or so? I don't know. I can't do simple math in my head, but something like that. That's another good downsell. But for upsells, what I really like is. Again, I typically work with the same types of clients. And so I'm not getting this giant client out of nowhere that I'm charging 5 times as much for. So I don't have a lot of experience with that. But but how I like to upsell my clients is with partnership type of stuff. And so my base product is this, custom WordPress website. And then it's, once we have that going on, do you need SEO services? I got this guy over here who's amazing, and he sends me, a kickback, but that only works if you have really, 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 really awesome vendors that you super know, love, and trust.
Right.
But because if you send them to bad people who are paying you, it's going to be a train wreck. But those kinds of things, or selling upsells as far as the product. Like, hey, here's an online bill pay system that we can set up for you. It's this amount, and it'll create efficiencies on your side. Just add-ons as far as the actual website itself, or partnership type things, or digital ads. I have like contractors that are all other freelancers that I have kind of partnered up and teamed up with. Yeah. And so yeah, we, if whatever comes up, I'm going to have someone to send them to send them
That's
to.
Great. Yeah.
That I know is awesome.
That's very powerful to be a connector.
Totally.
And even if you're not necessarily, profiting from that, or even if you just refer them, there's a lot of weight or there's a lot of, I was going to say power in that, definitely power, but there's just something that makes you look different in the eyes of a client if you're a connector and you have really good people in your corner, because it does lead to upsells, because people will likely come back 3 months later and be like, hey, didn't you know a guy who does something, or know a girl who does copywriting? And then what a perfect segue to get the conversation started and get back to having them engage, and then it's a great time to upsell stuff. So I love that. I think that's great. I think additionally to a financial strategy, just as important is, like, I guess we'd call it a marketing strategy or outreach strategy. I think that's worth diving into here as well, because like you mentioned, you went into a different state, a little bit different ball game when you're kind of starting fresh there. So this obviously could be several episodes, the idea of getting clients, which we've talked a lot about. So we've talked about a lot on the podcast, but I do want to touch this because this is a part of the planning aspect. Like, you have to know, where am I going to look for clients?
Process,
you got to figure out that. So I think you've talked about something before that I'm really big on, is starting with their existing network. How do you, I guess the question is, how do you advise people to think about where to get clients? Because this is a tricky one, and it's one of the first questions anyone has.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, again, I never had to try to get clients. It was all word of mouth based until I moved. And so this is something that's new for me in the last 5 years. And it was kind of a fun experiment because I went kind of crazy and I researched and I tried. I did all of the things. And as I'm scouring, Craigslist and Upwork boards and, reaching out to agencies for overflow work and, reaching out to people on LinkedIn. And you guys, I've done it all. And still, as I was doing all those things, my first local client came from the one person I knew here. I literally knew one person moving here, and her friend was looking for a web designer. And that's still where it came from. It still came from my one person network that I had here in Colorado. And so it's just interesting to me because some of those other things do work, and there are ways, and there's strategies and ways to do outreach. But a lot of times it's still going to come back to your existing network, and how you can, make that work for you. And I don't mean that in like a selfish way. It's always a partnership. It's always reciprocal.
Well, it's also how you serve them. Like I think that's
totally
one of the biggest concepts I've really thought about recently is the idea of serving over selling. And if you are in a networking group or you're looking at these forums or job boards or whatever, you really, instead of looking for a client, you should really ask yourself, how can you serve somebody better than anyone else? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that most, particularly early on, entrepreneurs and web designers just don't think about. It's because, again, it's not as sexy as the idea of landing a client or how do I get a client, but how do I serve? How do I get customer care?
It kind of goes back to what we talked about with the, just customer service, just treating people great. And again, it's so simple, calling them back.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's funny because a lot of people, especially, the new, newbies in freelance web design are horrified to put themselves out there to their existing network. And it's like, these are people who know you and trust you and like you. Like, here are 200 ambassadors for you, and they have no idea what you're doing, And I realize that sometimes you have a full-time job and you can't promote on Facebook that, hey, I'm now taking website client, whatever.
Right.
There are certain instances where it doesn't make sense, but there are still ways to reach out to that network, let them know what you're doing, and just finding those connections and partnerships. What was that game, the 7 degrees to Kevin Bacon or whatever? Like, we're all connected within 7 handshakes of the entire planet. Like, people know people who need websites. If the people don't need them themselves,
I absolutely. I feel a kinship with you because that's exactly how I started. It was 100% organic, referral based. Started with the people I knew who were in my circle. I tried cold calling. I want to ask you about cold calling here. I have my own thoughts. Against it. I tried it, never worked, hated it. And I'm good with people. And even back then, I'm much more confident now and well-spoken now, but it was painful to do any sort of cold outreach. So the idea of starting with what you have in place is absolutely huge. And I think you just hit the nail on the head there, Kelly. You have to let people know what you are doing, because the reality is there are so many clients who probably need services from web designers listening to this. And the only reason they're not paying you is because you have not offered it.
I told them.
You have got to offer it. Some of my students now are doing some really creative things with how they're promoting their sites on social media and stuff. I know you were talking about you're not a social media expert.
And
that's all right. But I say that to say whatever works for you. Like, if you can find ways to let people know without sounding super salesy or annoying, because you can come across a little bit annoying if you're just nonstop. Here's what I'm doing. Purchase this. But if you share how you helped a client, or you shared a new website and you said, here's a new design for this. Educate. Yes. Educate is obviously, I'm a big
This is what you need to do. Don't tell them, don't even make the offer until you tell them how to do it. And then it's like, oh, great. Can you just do that for me? It's all about just educate, don't be afraid to tell your secrets. Couldn't agree more. Obviously it's exactly what I'm doing. I'm like, I still get comments on this podcast. People are like, how are you doing? Why are you doing this for free? Literally when people ask me what's the secret to how you built your business? I'm like, listen to the podcast. It's every episode is just, one piece of how I did it. So that's so important. And it really is. And I hope people listen to this realizing
when it comes to outreach, starting with where you're comfortable and what you have in place is huge. There's so many people right now who have not purchased from you because you haven't offered it. Mm-hmm. So don't be shy about that. But then there is some strategy involved with this as far as I think probably with what works. You can always track that. If you join a networking group and it's a bust, then try a Chamber of Commerce or a different networking group or something like that.
Give everything a shot. Again, because depending on your personality, your situation, what people you're going after, what industries you're going, different things are going to work for different people. And so you almost have to try it all and see what works for you.
So throw it all at the wall and see what sticks, right?
I mean, truly.
Your thoughts on cold outreach?
I mean, I don't enjoy it. I am not a good salesperson, in that regard. But I will say that is something I did attempt again when I moved to college. I tried it all, and I don't think I ever cold called anyone, but I did where I did have a little bit of success was social media messaging. That seemed to be a couple steps up from email. Emails get lost. But social media messaging, I would point out something like, hey, your website, I just noticed it isn't on a secure site. Let me know if you need help with that. Something like that. Or
were these like company websites where you could or company Facebook profiles where you could message?
Yes. These were company Facebook profiles of local businesses. And I would always start with like, hey, I'm a huge fan, which I wasn't lying. I was specifically hunting down, websites that I wanted to work on of companies that I would like to work with. And then, I would either point out, your site isn't mobile friendly at all. I'd love to help. Or it's not secure. You're getting, Google's mad at you. Just silly things like that. And I would always get a response. I wouldn't always, get the project. I think I got like one website project out of all of those. So horrible success rate, but still something. Again, I tried it all. So I'm not a huge fan of the cold outreach. And again, it's such a waste of resources when you could be putting that energy and time into your existing network and just reaching out to people you already know and saying, hey, here's what I'm doing. Hey, I know you know this person in this company. Can you introduce me? Or
I totally agree. And like
so much better.
Nowadays, I think people are a little more wise to that, to where more than ever, people want to work with somebody they know in the realm of their existing network. So that's where the idea of the people aren't necessarily your clients. They could be. It's who they know and who they're connected with. So sometimes when you do like a Facebook post or a social media post about what you're up to and what you're offering, it doesn't mean that your aunt is going to buy your website. You probably don't want your aunt to purchase your website services.
Family are the worst clients.
Right, yeah. But they may know somebody and they were like, well, actually, I know somebody, or even if a friend or a professional network. Like that is such a better way to go. When I first started, I took it one step further and actually like walked down my main street, just walked into businesses with my brochure.
Love it.
Well, it was, I thought it was pretty cool until, it was terrifying. But like I got literally the door like slammed on me with a couple people who were like, no soliciting, although it didn't help that I wore a tie. I probably looked like a straight up insurance salesman or a missionary. Yeah. I was like, no, I just want to help you out with your website if you need help. So I definitely would not advise that. However, that experience, I actually did businesses who I already had connections with. They actually saw what I was up to and they were like, okay, that actually did land me a few jobs, but it was with people who already knew me. So again, going back to the outreach. So either way, this is still a really important piece to this puzzle of planning. You need to think about what strategy is going to work for you. Like you said, Kelly, it really depends on your market. Like there's no exact way for everyone to get clients when it really depends on your personality, what kind of network you have in place, even like where you are in the world. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. There's a lot of business opportunities here with groups and meetups and all types of different Chamber of Commerces. Out in the middle of nowhere, it's a little harder to do things locally, to where there's a whole different strategy you can take for online groups and getting your name out that way. So either way, I think being intentional about that is huge. So we've covered some great stuff. Planning, business plan, everything that we covered there. Working on the business, being intentional about clearing some time every week to work on the business, which will help, as we talked about, in so many ways. Having some sort of actual financial strategy, so your products, your services, that's going to help you, shape your plan. outreach, having a strategy for that. And then the last thing I want to talk about real quick was processes. More specifically, like you and I both did early on, we just kind of, is it winged it? Is that the right word? Winged it?
Yeah.
Winged it? We winged it. We wunged it. There's a new word. I usually always make up a word or two on every podcast episode. So wunged it is the word for this one. But when it came down to that, when you're just winging, your services, like you said, sometimes you just don't, there's no intentional strategy to it. How important is it to set those processes? I'm asking this in like a devil's advocate kind of way.
Right.
Your thoughts on those processes and how important?
Yeah, no, it is. It's critical. This is, when I reached a breaking point again. I've mentioned previously there was a point where I literally had my newborn in my arm and my toddler hanging on my leg and a preschooler jumping on the couch. I think at least 3 of us were crying, and it just kind of, and that was also the year I had my third kid was the year that my business grew by like 70%, something crazy. Wow. And so again, that was that I'm drowning in work. I'm drowning in kids. I cannot keep doing this. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, that's it. I'm taking a step back and we're figuring this out because I can't keep doing this for another 5 years. So that's when I got into the processes. I read E-Myth, which is highly recommended for the whole process, to wrap your head around what we're talking about here. And basically the point is, it's to create efficiencies. It's for your own sanity. It's so that you're not duplicating the same work over and over again. It's so that you have a process, so that you're not like, so every time you sit down, you're not like, what am I working on? Where is, what's today? I used to literally, I would take the first 20 minutes of me sitting down to work, trying to figure out what I should be working on. And so to just, have some sort of project management. I have the simplest setup on the planet. I actually tried 17 hats for a while, but I'm such a FreshBooks super fan that I couldn't do it.
And that's fine.
I saw it being a great thing if you did it all, but I was like, I can't do this and that. I wanted to use all of it or none of it.
Gotcha.
But anyway, I've tried so many. And so I use Trello and Google Drive.
Listen,
that's my
tools,
system.
I'm not telling this to you exactly, Kelly. I'm telling this to everyone. The tools do not matter near as much as
what works for you.
Yes. The processes, whether you put that in a Google spreadsheet or whether you put that in Google Docs or whether you put that in 17 hats or FreshBooks,
right.
Basecamp, whatever, that doesn't matter. It's more important that you at least have the process out. And I think that's where seeing what you have in place, how you can refine it is really important, like you just talked about, because otherwise...
Look for automation.
Yeah, the automation.
Look for simplicity.
As an entrepreneur, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is anything I do twice, I make it replicable somehow, whether I do it or my VA Cam does it now, or or even a lot of times I just create templates so I can just drag and drop templates and change out a name.
That's a great point too. You mentioned a VA, and it's like, once you get to that point where you're like, God, I could really use some extra help. Well, guess what? You're going to have to write out a process for them to follow anyway. So it's something that just
have it.
Yes, it has to be done at some point. The sooner, the better. And again, you don't have to, it's not going to be perfect the first time you set it up. And it will continue to evolve. Absolutely. Especially if you bring on team or whatever. But you cannot scale in any capacity unless you have some set processes, or the world will implode.
And I feel like even if you don't want to, even if you're not ready to build this big agency, or you don't want to take on people yet, for your sanity.
Yes.
If you don't have, in the case of websites, a web design process, it's going to be a mess. This is why, and it's costly. It's so costly. It leads to burnout. It leads to all the problems. There is such power in a process. And I'm sure you, Kelly, can back me up in saying it is so worth the time to make sure you put all your processes in place, because it's going to help you. It's going to help your clients. It's going to help you be more profitable, be more balanced and sane. Like, this really is kind of the glue to planning and running a business, right?
Right. Well, and we've touched on several, different parts of business today, and I have a process for prospects and sales. I have a process for the actual, project, the web design and everything. And then I have a process for like the ongoing relationship with my existing clients, because we've talked about that too. It's more important to keep your existing clients than it is to find new ones. Because guess what? They're going to need a new website in like 3 or 4 years, and you want them to come back to you. Yeah. So yeah, those are the processes that I kind of have set up. And yeah, I would, gosh, life was just straight chaos before the processes came into my world.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, it's just key, particularly when you do have, like, we're both parentpreneurs. That's really difficult if you're winging stuff. If your life outside of your office, if it's chaos, no matter what, when you have toddlers, it's just chaos. Like, I know right now I'm going to step outside my office after this call, and my little girls, I love them to death, but it's going to be destroyed outside. Like, my wife, there's no way she could keep up with those two. They're like little tornadoes. So that does all factor into your business as well. If you don't, like, I want people to go into their business in their office and like, this is what I have control over. I can control, this kind of stuff. That's what I want for everybody listening to this. So,
well, it's funny because as a parent, you'll appreciate this. Something I said a lot, again, my kids are in school now, but as they were in that toddler phase you're talking about, was I would say a lot, like, I hate half-assing. Like, I love having my own business because it's mine. It's the only thing in my world that's mine. They have taken over my car. They took over my house. They took over my body. And so it's like the only thing that was mine. So like you said, like walking into my office, it's like my happy place. And I love, being there for my kids and working from home and being able to do that. But I hated half-assing both. I felt like that was that constant struggle. But again, the putting the processes in place made all of that so much smoother.
Yeah, it really is so worth the time for anyone who's, if you feel like you're drowning in work or tasks, it's likely that you just haven't sat down and were intentional about the process and setting all that out and creating some sort of standard operating procedure, even if it's just, again, in a Google Doc or a text, whatever. Write it out if you have a pad, whatever. Keep, whatever your process is, just get that down. It really will make such a big difference. So, well, this has been great, Kelly. I have one more question for you. Just to outline real quick, we talked about the importance of having that plan, working on your business, financial strategy with your services. That's going to help you build confidence. A strategy for outreach and where you're going to find clients, how you're going to engage with them, and then those processes. Because I will say, I think it's worthwhile having the process at the tail end of all this, because you really aren't going to feel out your process until you get going. Like, I have a web design process course. I know you guys have process stuff and BreakIntoWeb, but at the end of the day, you're going to find out what works for you. And I always recommend my students, even who come through that course, use this and make it your own if you want.
Point,
like if you do copywriting, which I don't do, then you can work that in here. There's ways you can tweak that. So I love all that. That's great. Before I ask my final question, where would you like people to go to find out more about you? I know you have your website and BreakIntoWeb, but where would you like everyone to go after this?
Yeah. If you head over to breakintoweb.com/Josh Hall, you can find out more information about our course. Again, it's targeted to people, like to newbies just getting into web design, and aspiring freelancers. If you're an agency, please don't go, because you don't want our course. And we also have a special discount over there for the followers of the Josh Hall podcast. So,
and again, you're direct competition, but I'm fine with that. Like, I like that, because there's also a lot of value. I'm having someone else on the podcast here. One of my students is in my web design club, is also under my other guest, her coaching. So it's very worthwhile having 2 different programs to go through, or 2 different coaches or mentors, because
everyone
we all do stuff. Yeah, we all do it slightly different. So I love that. And then I'll make sure to link to your website as well for people to check out. Kelly, my last question, if I'm going to pretend like I was my friend 5 years ago, somebody doesn't know you exactly what you do, but they say, so Kelly, what's your 5-year plan with your web design business? What would you tell them?
5 years ago or right now?
Right now. They see you successful and they want to know, what's the next 5 years look like? How would you handle that?
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I mean, I have a 5-year plan, but that's more for, again, my overall lifestyle, and the goal right now is to retire my husband from healthcare, because it's a great industry, but he's kind of over it. And so that's our big goal right now, is to get him out of healthcare. And is my web design a part of that? Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Will I still be doing what I'm doing now in 5 years? I doubt it. I hope BreakIntoWeb is a much bigger part of what I do. And I would love to, instead of doing websites myself, I'd love to be sending those sites to our students and to help build their businesses. So there's always a goal. There's always like 20 goals. But yeah, in 5 years, I would say I would love to see, BreakIntoWeb growing and helping those people continue to, reach those freedom goals and the freelance lifestyle, and just impact as many lives as possible. And, keep doing my pro bono sites as well. That'll never go away, even if I hit the lottery tomorrow. So, but yes, hopefully my husband is out of his healthcare job.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect example of how you frame up goals that are much more than just, I want to make a certain amount.
That's my why. Yeah.
In 5 years. Yeah. I love that. Well, once you guys start your podcast, which I've talked to you about, and I'm really encouraging John to do as well, do the podcast, BreakIntoWeb podcast. Like, that just sounds like an awesome podcast.
I know, right?
I'm really excited for you guys to do that. So, Kelly, thanks so much for dishing out some really cool strategies in this one. I had a blast chatting with you, and I'm sure we could make each one of these little sub points their own episodes.
I know, it's true.
You'll do that on BreakIntoWeb. Maybe
there you go.
I mean, look, what we just talked about gave you about 3 or 4 months of content for the BreakIntoWeb podcast. So, yeah, there you go. Well, Kelly, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day and for coming on. I know you're a busy mom entrepreneur, so thanks for your time, and I'm looking forward to doing this again sometime.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.